Hello again, and welcome to the 359th edition of Forum for a Better Understanding. I'm Jim Grant, and it's a joy to be with you again as we discuss a very timely and a very important topic again this week. Our topic is called 8586-9/11, Time for Healing Now. 85, of course, refers to the horrendous attack on the Sikh temple in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, in which 6 Sikh faithful were brutally murdered. 86 refers to the burning of an Islamic temple in Joplin, Missouri, one day later. 9/11, of course, reminds us of that event 11 years ago, in which we are now remembering and praying for the meaning of all of that happening. Now, reflecting on these horrific events and the senseless shooting at the Aurora Cinema 2 weeks before that, Dr. Welton Gaddy, who is the executive director of the Interfaith Alliance, said this: "Our sorrow related to these recent tragedies is deepened by the reality of how much still must be done to eliminate violence spawned by hate, often religion-based. The grief we experience will fuel even greater efforts on our part to help shape a nation that celebrates rather than seeks to obliterate diversity." Let's begin our program with something Dr. Gaddy said at the Democratic National Convention, reminding all of us of the proper role of religion in public life. Can we hear it?
Should have a vigorous role in public life, there are some fine lines that shouldn't be crossed.
I'm going against both parties when I say this. I don't feel really good about religious outreach that says we want to take the role of the church and use that as a role for enlisting people to support our party. Religion's role in this nation has always been most important when congregations acted like religious bodies, not political bodies.
Once again, we have a very distinguished panel to help us unpack the process of healing that we are going to be discussing today. To my left, our first guest is Dr. Sharnjit Purewal, a family medical doctor with a practice in Clovis and a member of the Sikh Council of Central California. Beside him, we have Rabbi Rick Winer, spiritual leader of Temple Beth Israel here in Fresno. And across from me is our third guest, Rev Bryan Jessup, the minister serving the Unitarian Universalist Church of Fresno. I'd like each of our guests, if they could, to begin by perhaps reprising their opening thoughts that they shared on September 10th at the Islamic Cultural Center of Fresno, when we had another panel like this to share our faith and how we are addressing the issue of healing at this time in our history, in our country. Could you begin, Doctor?
Sure. Representing the Sikh community here in the Fresno area. I'm here to exchange our thoughts and have a good dialogue. I'm hoping through dialogue that we can, come to a better understanding about different faiths. And it's through dialogue that we can understand each other, we can work together better, and we can make our multicultural nation a better place to live. Personally, I really believe that God has sent us many messengers, and the underlying message is always the same. If you look at the different faiths, they all preach charity, brotherhood, love, piety, and I hope this kind of dialogue, if anything, it should make us realize that the message is the same. We shouldn't focus on the differences. We need to really focus on the underlying message, and then we're going to realize that we're more alike than we are different.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for that opening thought of stressing, obviously, the commonality that we do share in so many different ways. Rabbi, where would you like to talk about your initial insight on this issue?
As we sit here this week just after September 11th, and at the same time my community is preparing for our High Holy Day observance, and I keep thinking back over the years to when I was young and we read a list of our collective sins as we prepare to spiritually cleanse at this time of year. And in that acrostic list, a listing alphabetically of all the things we have done wrong as a community, we always had xenophobia listed. And I thought, okay, it's kind of silly, we need an X word, so let's just put it in there. And every year as I get older, I look back at that list and realize it belongs there. We in America have suffered far too often from the pitfalls of xenophobia. I went from growing up in Northern California off to the university where I studied comparative religion. Not hiding behind my own or within my own, but everything I've learned about other traditions and cultures has just enriched and given me the opportunity to better appreciate those things that complement each other between the different religions and cultures.
So we've learned that it's good to stress the positive and not be afraid of the different, the other. Brian, what would be your opening thought as we begin our conversation?
Well, as I think about the 11th anniversary of 9/11, I think about how that horrible event brought home to us in this country again the violence that is in the world, not just in the United States, but all over the world. And so we lost over 3,000 people altogether in that horrible event in 3 different locations. But around the world every day, people are suffering from violence. I mean, we've heard just recently in the news about what happened in Libya and the loss of our ambassador there. We've heard about what's happening in Syria, 26,000 people so far killed there, and then there's the horror of what's happening in Africa, in various places, and all over the world. There's tremendous violence. We feel, I think, a lot of times in our country somewhat protected from that, but 9/11 brought it to the fore. It happens here, and it actually happens here with much more regularity than we are frequently aware of. Our country has been pretty constantly at war for 400 years, and we've lost hundreds of thousands of people, beginning with the Revolutionary War, and of course in the Civil War, huge losses, but over 40 wars against Native Americans where countless lives were lost, and then the Mexican-American War, and then the war with Spain, whereby we got Cuba and the Philippines, and then World War I and World War II and Korea and Vietnam and now Afghanistan and Iraq. And that's just the war part. We've actually lost more people through domestic violence in the 20th century. Estimates are 10 million people killed between 1900 and 2000 in the United States through murder and domestic violence. And then there's mob violence in the United States, and that's what we saw at the Sikh temple, and it's what we saw in Joplin, Missouri, and the attack on the mosque. And mob violence in our 400 years, historians say, probably has killed around 2 million people, and that includes lynchings of African American people, and lynchings and killings of Asians and Hispanic Americans. And so there's violence in the world and violence in this country, and we are not immune from it at all. So our job as religious people is really cut out for us, and we have much yet to do.
So it looks like we find in all religions that there's a commonality and it's all good. And then we have this xenophobic quality that we want to avoid because the other, we should get to approach them. But then we find out that we basically don't. So my next question would be to everyone again. We titled this program and also the evening presentation of the Islamic Center, Time for Healing Now. I wonder if you'd open up that concept, Doctor. What would healing be, let's say from a Sikh perspective? What would be one aspect of healing? What would be one sign that we're healing? And why now, or how now?
Well, I think one of the basic tenets of the Sikh religion that pertains to that would be accepting the will of God. I mean, we take action, we do what we can. We're not that passive that we don't take action and do good deeds. But when our deeds fail us, then we still have to accept the will of God, and that's one of the basic steps of healing. Now, the other thing I think, basic tenet of Sikh religion, is to suppress the ego, and until we suppress, each one of us, suppresses our own ego, we really can't find peace of mind, inner peace that's going to lead to healing. So suppressing the ego to the point where you don't see your enemy as bad. You have to look at your enemy as a creation of God, just like we're all creations of God. So to reach that level of inner peace that you can actually pray for your enemies, that's a huge step, but that's really essential for healing.
You just said something that I can resonate with from Jesus. Love your enemies. It's not as if the idea is that they don't exist. There's this idea that actually he gives it as taken for granted. They're our enemies. Love them. And then he gives a whole praxis on how do you do that. Rabbi, from your perspective, this is a season for you of healing. Introduce us to that concept in Judaism.
At this time specifically, we are supposed to really think not only as a community but individually as to how we may have wronged someone throughout the year. Obviously, the best way to deal with it is to repair relationships as you go along. But it's considered the time where, okay, if you've built it up, let's see what we can get rid of through the year. And what I've found interesting, knowing the history of how Judaism has faced the High Holy Day period and seeking forgiveness, that people really do put it into practice. I will get phone calls and make phone calls of people saying to someone, okay, so a few months ago when I did this, I'm sorry, please forgive me. And then what goes with that from the perspective of the Jewish community is not simply asking for forgiveness. Behavior has to follow it up. We prove that we are worthy of forgiveness by acting in accordance with that. Words are important, but actions are as well. And so if we're looking for healing, if we're looking for repair, we have to get behind it with our actions too.
I've got to echo that one. Saturday at your Torah service in the morning, Torah study, someone actually said, in the spirit of the season, I want to beg forgiveness from anyone that I may have cut off when they were talking. I'm sorry if I did. It might be my habit to do that, but I'm really sorry. If I was ever rude, I'm sorry. That was a beautiful gesture of someone who guides the presentation so nicely, just saying, in case I want to ask forgiveness. Brian.
I think we are right at the core of where transformation occurs in our hearts and in our faith. The healing comes, I think, deep inside ourselves when we do understand that we are all human beings here on earth. And so when we gather as interfaith colleagues, frequently it's honestly easier to get along because we know one another on a polite level, and we bring out our best fruit and put it on the table, and we bring out our best food, and we bring out our best selves within our own houses of worship, and then in various factions in our faiths. We squabble with one another, and in our country we squabble with one another. So I'm thinking in terms of healing now in our country. It's a presidential election year, and things are very vituperative. I have been concerned really much of my adult life, but it seems like it's even more now with the division between conservative and liberal in our country. And that's something that we really need to repair, because there are many things about which all of us need to be conservative, and other things around which we need to be generous and liberal. And conservative with our own consumption and our own behavior, generous and liberal in our willingness to forgive other people, and an understanding that ultimately there are no conservatives, there are no liberals, they're just human beings on earth with our concerns and our worries, and if we're ever going to beat our swords into plowshares, we have to listen to one another.
We have to take our break at this very moment, but stay tuned, because in 1 minute we'll be right back to further develop these concepts that have just been put on the table so beautifully. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
For over 25 years, KNXT has been serving the people of the San Joaquin Valley with good family television that's just not available anywhere else. It's important for you, the viewer, to help support this valuable tool of ministry. KNXT needs to continue to grow and bring you important programming about your faith. But sometimes it's hard to stop and find the time. Make it easy. Go to knxt.tv and find out how easy it is to support your Catholic television station, KNXT TV.
I really want to thank our three guests for their opening comments. We've had 2 rounds, let's say, of opening thoughts. Now I want to throw it back to them to see if they can unpack some of their opening revelations. Brian brought up repair. That made me think of tikkun olam and the whole idea that we really have a lot of repairing to do. So my question to the three of you from your traditions, what would be a concrete, practical, real thing, a discipline, a procedure, a behavior that could actually perhaps repair some of the violence, some of the consumption, some of the greed that makes us the culture that we've become? Anyone can start at any time. At this point, you are not under my scepter. Rabbi.
Once again, in the spirit of the season that we find ourselves, my community is taking hold of a few big drives. We're doing a major drive to bring in food for those less able to provide their own. And I'm also working to start bringing in school supplies for the lower income families. Each little step that we do makes a difference. And for those people who spend their lives working on diplomacy, I think that's fantastic. But many of us need to have little steps. And again, as I'm preparing for this season that goes back for centuries in our community, what the ancient people did in their pilgrimages was they brought a goat to the temple or something like that, and it was sacrificed. We don't do that anymore. It's been 2,000 years. But that doesn't mean that we can't offer from our hearts, and the way that we do it today is by taking items and our own funds and helping spread that around to people who could use it. So it becomes a modern sacrifice, as it were, and a small step that gets us into the practice. Our tradition tells us that one of these good deeds, we call it a mitzvah, leads to another. You get yourself in the practice and you just do more of it, and you start with little steps.
Let me ask Dr. Purewal something very personal. I'm wondering if you could share how the Sikh community, as a people and as a faith, did respond to the tragedy and the terroristic massacre of your Sikh faithful in Wisconsin, because I think you can give us an example of how a healing presence can be a light to us as we look for our own behaviors to change.
Yeah, well, Sikh tradition has been quite, charitable from the very beginning. The tradition of langar, which is the meal that is served at the temple, that was one of the early things that the Sikh prophets started as a way of providing charity, to providing for the poor and the hungry. Locally, the idea of giving and helping those who are in need, this is one of the central teachings, what we call vand shakel, share your earnings with the needy. And the Sikh Council here in Fresno, Madera area, we, in the past we did huge fundraisers for the tsunami, Hurricane Katrina, the earthquake in Haiti. Similarly, we've had a pretty large fundraiser for the victims of the shooting in Wisconsin. Also, doctors' organizations have come together. They've sent psychiatrists there to help out with with those who need psychiatric assistance. There's a national organization, international organization actually, called United Sikhs, who also has been providing aid and providing counseling for those who need it there.
Brian, there's so many ways I think that your church, the Unitarian Universalists, have in a sense led the way in many different ways, social justice commitments. What might you see as the healing aspect of some of your ministry, some of your community efforts, that there's really an energy of healing in it?
We do, like many other houses of worship, special collections for disasters and for people in need, and so around Hurricane Katrina and around the tsunami in Japan, and we have done those kinds of things. Unitarian Universalists are a privileged people, privileged with education, privileged to be substantial middle-class people, and we have folks in positions of power who can weigh in on public policy also. And a thing that I think is really important is, and I've seen the diocese do this also. The diocese is leading around a humane response to homelessness. And it's not a issue of conservative or liberal, it's an issue of we're all children of God. And that kind of thing for public policy, so we begin to change things. So there's an organization in town that's called Faith in Community. And they have taken some very effective action around immigration and the humanity of immigrants, and around mortgage foreclosures, saying we really need to have systemic change here. And I think that a huge part that religions may play is in promoting, and the Interfaith Alliance does this, promoting civil dialogue and collaboration. It's just untenable and unholy that we get Democrats and Republicans in California and in the nation refusing to collaborate with each other and create sensible responses for our country. The animosity and the vitriol does us no good. We are all Americans and we're all citizens of the planet. And it's really time that I think our faith leads the way, and the Interfaith Alliance helps with this, in saying, time to end this senseless vitriol between us, and it's time to practice tikkun olam. It's time to put the world together.
It's time for healing now. Speaking of time, we're running out of time on this program, but you all will have at least one more chance. There may have been a thought underdeveloped or something that you haven't been able to even to put on the table yet. Is there something, Doctor, that you know from your Sikh tradition that you think has light to shed on our topic today of time for healing now? Any final thought?
Well, I think, it is, to have healing, you need to move forward. And like I said, when good deeds fail, then you don't give up on action, for sure. Sikh religion has traditionally been a religion of, in my view, empowerment. Empowerment of the weak, the downtrodden. It's our responsibility to help the weak and the downtrodden and those who have been discriminated against. So there's always that aspect of justice. We have to give people the hope that there will be justice to move forward and heal. And we need to do more of that.
Thank you, Dr. Purewal. Rabbi Winer.
Hand in hand with the ancient concept, Jewish concept of tikkun olam, repairing the world, is a statement from one of the ancient rabbis, Rabbi Tarfon, who said, "It is not our responsibility to complete the task, but neither are we free to desist from it." It's a wonderful reminder that we look at these massive tasks and have to let go. We're not individually going to be able to finish it, but if we each take our little part, we will make a difference.
And we do daily make a small difference. Brian.
So the seventh principle of Unitarian Universalism is respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And I think for us as religious people in our various languages and rituals to understand how we are connected to one another and to the interconnected web, and that we take time daily to experience that connection with God or with the interconnected web and with one another. That we consistently do that and remind ourselves we are not alone. We're all in this together.
A final thought comes to us from Dr. Sue Kapoor, and it's a pledge, and I'd like to close the program with this pledge. On my honor, I pledge that hate has no place in my heart and in my spirit. Hate has no place in my home and in my workplace. Hate has no place in my school and in my community. Hate has no place in my country. Hate crimes have no place in my future, not in my life, no way. God bless. Till next week, till we see you again.